Well, thank you very much for inviting me, guys. My name is Cynthia Zelinski. I'm based in Mexico City. I've been working in market research my whole career. Ever since I graduated, I started on the bottom of, just taking notes and things like that, running errands, and it's become my passion, actually. So now I work as a freelance. Um, I have, I guess, what every millennial would want, a job working from home. I run a set of different people that are based around Mexico, in different cities. And what we do that, and we do Colombia, and we do Puerto Rico as well. So I do a lot of Latin America. Basically, I work for computers that do FMCG, which are fast moving consumer goods. So the categories I work most in are alcohol, spirits, distilleries, beers, and I work a lot with soft drink companies. One of my biggest clients is Pepsi. So anyway, I work with Diageo, which is a huge conglomerate. They have Johnny Walker whiskey. They have Don Julio tequila. They've got all kinds of brands, right? And so anyway, I've worked with a lot of these companies. I've been in market research for 20 years, so it's been a while. I've worked with Netflix as well. I work with Lay's in terms of snacking as well. And what we do usually Cesar wanted me to talk to you about what market research is. I don't know how much you know about it. So basically what we do is to gain information directly from the consumer to understand consumer behavior. So I work with companies as to help them understand what's happening out with the consumers, right? To understand the whys. Now, in market research, you have two branches. You have quantitative research, which is all about numbers and polls, questionnaires, like all these surveys you get, you fill in, ABC, and you only have 4 options, and you really don't have, maybe they'll ask you for, your opinion in a certain, I don't know, in a certain question, right? And you give a little bit more of an answer. But basically, it's all about numbers and graphs and percentages. That's a huge part of market research. I'm sure you've heard about Nielsen. That's what they do. They have all these polls, and they do them for everything. They do them, of course, right now for elections, you hear that, but they do them for everything, for what you buy, how you buy it, where you buy it, So this is the big thing, right? So they have all the big numbers. I don't work in that. I work in qual research. Now, qual research is, it's more about the whys. It's, okay, so you have 83% consumers like this flavor, but you don't know why. You've no idea why they like it, why they choose it, why they have that presentation. So the problem with not knowing why is that you don't know where to move next. So we work as consultants to these big firms, right? And qualitative gives all the texture to all these percentages. Now, I rarely see anything in terms of numbers. So what I do is I talk to people. So how do we talk to people? We have focus groups. So you invite 8 to 10 people, and you're looking for specifics. So you have a sample in terms of the age, what type of consumer, what it is that they buy, right? And you invite them to a group, and we sit and we talk. There's a guide, and so you have a certain objective, and you have techniques that you walk through, you talk to them, and the idea is to make it, open and have people be comfortable, relaxed, and give them, they give you all their feedback. So they give you the whys. Why do they buy this flavor? Why do they like this advertisement? Why they behave? Obviously, they don't say why. It's certain techniques, psychological techniques, how you approach them, how you talk to people, and that's how you get like all the information. Obviously, you don't base yourself in just one group of consumers. You have 4, 6, 8, depending on how broad your sample is, right? And then you also have individual interviews. Now, when you have people that have, you know, difficult profiles, if you're working in pharmaceuticals, for example, and you have to talk to patients who have a certain affection, a certain like condition, and they need to, you need to address to, I don't know, you have to talk to a certain cancer patient who has been to certain, you know, place. Well, then you have a one-on-one. If topics are kind of delicate, if you're talking about money, if you're talking about financials, I did a big research with Citibank. Well, you have to do a one-on-one to understand how they're investing, where they're investing, why they choose those investments. And they don't want to talk about their money with 10 other people, right? So it has to be a one-on-one. So you do that. And now in this COVID time, what we're doing is a lot of online groups. So just like this, I have online groups with people, and usually, obviously, they, you know, I present things, I show them things, I show them slides or whatever, and we talk about that. My favorite, though, is doing ethnographies, which obviously we can't do, which is like taking an interview, but instead of doing an interview in an office, we go to people's houses. So, for example, if you want to see, I did one with children, right? And how they use crayons and markers and things like that. So they were quite young, so we went into their house and we saw how they store them, how they used them, what kinds of papers, how they held a pencil, what they were choosing, what moms kept, you know, for special occasions, how, you know, when they would buy them, you know, how small they would keep the pencils, if they would chug them out, if they would recycle. I mean, things like that. I did one in Colombia, which was big. We did Colombia, Peru, and Mexico. We did blenders. So you say, how much can you talk about blenders? Well, you go into a house and you have a lady prepare you some food, right? So how they use it, what fruits they choose, you know, and it's incredible because there you can actually see how they're preparing food, how they're using it. In ethnographies, it's more about, we've done some with like Bailey's liquor, right? So we had to see girls' night out or girls' night in, right? So they would get together and they would have like a movie night. And so we would be invited and they would have 3 or 4 people and they would host, have a bottle, and we'd see how people, you know, some just brought out chips, some had like a major spread, and how drinks, you know, set the mood or they don't, or how they fit in or they don't. We've done that with gin as well. So anyway, so there's many ways that you can actually do this. We do things, for example, with Uber, we did one. So we asked people, we met at their house, we talked to them, and then we said, okay, so now let's bring out your app and show me how you get an Uber and how long do you wait. And then we went on the Uber ride with them, you know, with the respondents, and we talked to the driver, and so the driver gave us his feedback. And all of this happens. I need to say, I work with international clients, so I usually don't work with Mexican clients. So it's the client is, you know, who's another researcher, is sitting up in front with the driver, and we have the translator there so that everything, you know, starts happening at the same time, and you're immersed in the experience, right? So that's a little bit about, you know, how it works, how market research works in those 2 branches. Also, how does market research work inside a company? Usually, it depends on how big companies are. They have a marketing department, they have some people, but they need like this outsourcing. So there's several agencies that are specialized in qual research. And what you do is you give them information, real information about the consumer. So you start working on a plan. So what does marketing need? Maybe it depends. You can use this for anything. So for example, you want to launch a new campaign. Okay, So you go to an advertising agency and they give you their proposals. And so I talk to people. So then we go in, we write up the guide and we say, okay, we want to evaluate. For example, Johnny Walker a year ago wanted to launch a new campaign, right? And they wanted to see where whiskey was sitting, right? Between young consumers, young adults, like 18 to 30. Why aren't they drinking whiskey? Why are they stopping this, right? So we want to do a campaign so that they're invited. So turns out whiskey was really boring. Nobody wants to be alone, sitting, you know, like all that advertising, sitting alone on top of the world, drinking whiskey, or in this office. Everybody wants to be hanging out with people, talking to others, right? So what happens with whiskey? You made it so exclusive and so boring, people don't want to have it when they're going out. So what do? So they started thinking about mixing whiskey, which was before a no-no. If you did that, people are like, you don't know how to drink whiskey. Well, turns out that Johnny Walker said, we need to do this mix up and we need to start mixology, right? So let's get some cool bartenders, let's get some cool drinks, some cool serves. And they gave it to 3 agencies. These 3 agencies started working out their own plan, how they would see, you know, Johnny Walker evolving, you know, because that top hat's kind of like strict and strange and kind of like very passe. So what do? So bringing some more color into this. So we test these 3 things and I just give them feedback of what people say. And then they go, so the company sees the outcome. I give them a report on these 3 things and they go back and analyze and they decide where they want to go, what route they want to take, what they want to, you know, go into or whatever. So that's how they decide, you know, how to continue, right, with that advertising campaign. Innovation, that's a big one. You want to go and develop new products or things like that. And so, okay, I have new flavors and new presentations, so bring them out. I just did that during the pandemic. So what happened? I'm sorry, there's a lot of background noise here. I'm sorry if you're hearing all my family. Anyway, so what happens is we have this huge thing with hard seltzer. I'm going to talk a little bit about hard seltzer now. Hard seltzer is, how do you call it? What is it? White Claw. White Claw, right? So White Claw is a sensation in the US, right? Everybody's had it since 2019. It's huge. It started with a developer who's a Canadian, and he came up with this idea, you know, of developing a drink that, you know, going to younger audiences. And what did he want? He wanted something that would be easy to drink like a beer, but it wouldn't be so filling, doesn't have all the carbs, it still gives you a flavor, and it's something you can, you know, use throughout the day, right? The perfect summer drink, right? So it worked so well in the US and it grew exponentially. I mean, people could not find it. And now what's happening is that the US has this, and now it's going to develop all over the world. But all markets are different, correct? So now we're testing different flavors, different presentations of hard seltzer in Mexico. We're doing Colombia, they're doing South Africa. They're also testing in the UK because the UK doesn't have it, nobody's seen it. So it's about innovation, trying to see if this new product that was such a success in the US will be the same success in Mexico and in other markets. So we imported things, people tested them, they had a trial to see if the flavor was appealing, if it was not, and in, you know, based on that, the company decides what they should follow, right? And so after that, they can develop, you know, a different concept. Now, hard seltzer is a huge thing. We talked about this, Cesar and I talked about it. It's huge. This pandemic, I worked for 7 different research companies in the UK, and they all have different clients that are trying to develop this, different companies that are trying to get a hold of these new markets, trying to target, I mean, people your age, young adults your age, right? So they're trying to see what's interesting, how they can make it work. And you know, that's a whole thing. So that's what market research does. And that's how you work with marketing. You work through advertising, you work through innovation. What happens when a brand is outdated? It's a good brand, but I don't like to, you know, they think, well, we need to improve our image, or we need to give more information, or maybe Cesar worked in pharma, but for example, I'm thinking about vitamins, right? I work with vitamins. And for example, there's, I don't know if you have it in the US, it's called Redoxon in Mexico. They have it in the UK, it has a different name, but anyway, it's like an emergency, right? So it's been around forever, right? And it was paired up with another component, but they've never said anything. So, okay, let's bring out those attributes and let's say that we have zinc and tell you how that works better, right? So it's giving you additional benefits to bring it back to life, to improve the image. But, you know, sometimes they improve the image, but it goes all wrong because it doesn't talk about the original product. So it's staying within those boundaries and talking to consumers and working. It's a back and forth. It's not just one delivery. There's certain stages in the development of products, in brand image, in things like this, okay? So this is how it works together. So it's an ongoing relationship with consumers and with the company. So we're like the bridge, you know, because sometimes companies come up with these ideas and they think, well, we know everything, but it's a bunch of people who are like 30 or 40 developing products for children or young adults or, you know, homemakers, you know, and they have no idea of what they need, right? So it's actually trying to communicate between both. And it's a lot about consumer behavior. So I studied business, but I think I should have studied psychology. I think that would have been better. But these are things that you find out later in life, right? I don't know how it is. We're for time. If you have any, I don't know if you want me to talk about anything else. Cesar, flavor is a big challenge, but the problem, and we were talking about this, the thing with the flavor and tapping into it is that people are willing to sacrifice the flavor for the buzz or the flavor for less calories. And so it's a balancing, you know, it's a balancing act. And so you have to understand what the consumer needs right now. This is why we have all these keto diets, we have paleo diets, we have, you know, all these people going into like these very niche vegans and things like that. So this is exactly tapping into what's happening with young adults, with young consumers, and what they're looking for, right? And it's all about image. So White Claw feeds into that image, right? Or all the hard seltzers, that's what they're looking for. Yes, I do get paid. I get paid and the consumers also get paid. So if they have to do a lot of, you know, a lot of extra work, so they do online diaries and things like that. Where would you recommend to start after graduation? In terms of this, there's a lot of internships and many companies. It really depends. The ones I work with are based in the UK, basically London, but there's a lot of them. In Chicago is a huge market for the US because it represents like the Midwest, and it's talking about like a healthy economy, but they're still quite conservative. So, you know, it gives you a good middle ground because the US is such a big market that you don't only do one city. So there's a lot of market research agencies in Chicago, based in Chicago and based in New York. Texas has a lot of them also. because of the huge Hispanic market. So they cater a lot to the Hispanic market. And I've worked also with some of them. I've even gone to do interviews and groups with Hispanic markets in LA and Texas. I hope that answers what you wanted, Laura. Anybody else? What would you say is the most difficult part of market research? I think you need to, as a consultant, you need to develop credibility. And it takes a while to develop that credibility. So you actually need to work under like a big firm, and they really have it well planned out, right? So they have the junior research executives, and that's when you go in and you take the notes and you listen, and you know, you're doing like all the, you know, all the hard work of figuring out and putting things together. There's a lot of observation. You really need to like consumer behavior. You need to like what people are doing and be very observant, because all these things give you cues as to where they're, you know, where they're leaning towards. You have to read between the lines as well. So you need to have several things. Psychology helps a lot for this. Consumer behavior, just read up. You always have to be in terms of trends. You need to start looking at what's happening. What are the trends? Where is it going? Different tribes, you know, things like that. You said that you don't work a lot with statistics. Okay, so this, you say you don't work with statistics. No, I don't work with statistics, and you do get a lot of unique responses. But the thing is, there's always a why because of this, right? So when you start understanding the whys behind these responses, then you can start organizing. That's why I said it's not just one interview, it's not just one group, and it's just not one methodology, right? So we might have, for example, you might be talking to some experts in the field. For example, I'm going to talk about facial care. We talked to, there's this big brand that wants to like develop a new line of facial care, right? And so what they wanted to do was to talk to beauty bloggers. So we needed to contact beauty bloggers, and the 3 beauty bloggers from the US, from New York, from Mexico, and I believe the other one was in Indonesia, because that's a huge market for facial care. All of Asia is huge. It's much bigger than the US, Europe, or whatever. That's where it's happening. So the 3 bloggers got together, and they got together in a workshop. This was all virtual, in a workshop with people from Unilever, actually. And they broke out into like rooms, and they came up with ideas. You have to start crazy, and then you have to land in terms of what you're doing, right? So after doing that, the marketing team has a good idea of where the trends are heading, what's happening in the US, what's happening in Mexico, what's happening in Asia. They develop concepts, and then you go in with something. You can't just give things, you know, that are that broad. You have to like hone them in, and once they're there, then people can test them and they can talk about them. And you have to try and understand everybody. So consumer behavior is about not just thinking that you're right, you have to understand everybody else. So when you have all those responses, you have to bring in everything. And you usually never work alone. I have several colleagues I pair up with. So it's not only what I'm saying, because you have to understand. Another thing that is huge in Mexico, in Latin America, is we have very defined social classes, which is not great, but that's how it is. So that defines very well. You need to understand what the motivation is, because if you're talking about a middle class, or if you're talking about a lower class, their motivations are different in terms of buying. And it's not only price, it's all about their lifestyle. So I think that has to do a lot. So you have to start understanding, you know, opening up and understanding. It says, what is a typical career progression like? What do you mean? How long it takes you to do this? It really depends. I see a lot of people go in. Like I said, I've been here twice, so I've seen people who are research execs and now they have their own company and they're completely successful. They're founders of really big companies. Um, Market research companies in the UK, there's one called Eighth Day, for example, and they're, I mean, just very brilliant people. So it took them, I guess, like 10 years to develop their own strategy brand. Okay, but it depends and says, okay, Laura, I am from Colombia. Were you working only with international companies where you were in Colombia? Yes. Well, what happens? Did you work with any Colombian brands? Laura, I didn't work with a Colombian brand per se. Actually, I was working with Unilever, and once I went there, and we were looking. Unilever was buying a big detergent company, and they were bringing in their knowledge and trying to, not let go of what was of the brand. I think it was Lavomatic, because that was like 5 or 6 years ago, and they wanted to make the transition into the Colombian market, with housewives, and that worked well. But I work with a lot of international brands in Colombia, actually. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Thank you so much. If you have any questions, uh, you can drop me an email. Cesar, you have my email. Please share it if anybody wants to, look into this more. I'd be more than happy to, give you guys any tips or answer any more questions. Thanks. Bye-bye.